Hello and welcome to Mr. Tompkins Edtech and my series on Microsoft Excel. In this video we're going to be looking at naming ranges. If you're just dropping in, you might like to go watch this intro video first, which will explain a bit more about this series and tell you where you can download the Excel workbook that accompanies the series. If you've already done that, then let's get into it. Now, a range in Excel normally refers to a rectangular area on the spreadsheet and is defined by its top left and bottom right cells, separated by a colon. So this table here is referred to in Excel as the range C10 to G16. Ranges are used as the input value in many of the functions used in Excel. For instance, the sum function adds up all the values in a given range. So if I wanted to add up these 8 numbers, I could type the formula in equals sum, and then inside the brackets I'm going to write the range that I want to sum. So in this case it's going to be equals sum top left to bottom right, which would be equals sum B3 to C6. You can see that gives me the value 27. Now there are lots of functions in Excel which use these ranges as the input value. Another example is the count function, which is going to count the number of values in the input range. So if I type in equals count B3 to C6, it's going to count the number of different cells in that range, giving me the answer of 8. Normally in a big spreadsheet in Excel, we're going to have different areas of the sheet which we're going to use for different types of information. And so we might end up having lots of different ranges that we're going to want to use in our formula. Now these ranges are not so handy for humans to remember, and if you're anything like me, when you're looking around your spreadsheet a few days or weeks after you made it, you're going to struggle to remember what all these different ranges were for and why you needed them in the first place. Now, to make your spreadsheet a little bit easier to follow, we can give these ranges a more meaningful name and then use those names in any formula and functions that require a range, instead of using the top left bottom right corners that Excel likes to use. So let's give this group of numbers a name. I'm going to call them numbers. And I can do that by selecting the range and then tapping into this box up here in the top left hand corner of the sheet that normally displays what cell I'm currently focused on. I'm going to type the name I want to give this range, so let's just type in numbers. Now if I tap somewhere else on the page and then come back to this same box up here and type numbers in it again, it's not going to rename this new cell as numbers. Instead it's going to refocus Excel on the range I gave it before, and you can see it jump straight back on this range. Now I have defined this range as numbers, I can use it in any formula that expects a range as part of its input values. So instead of writing equals sum B3 to C6 like I did earlier, I can now just write equals sum numbers instead. So tapping that in, you can see I get the same result as I did before by putting in the range. Now I can use this name in loads of other formulas. Equals count numbers is going to tell me how many cells there are in the range, so it gives me the answer 8. Equals average numbers is going to give me the mean average of those 8 different numbers. Equals mode numbers is going to give me the modal value. And there are lots and lots of other formula in Excel that similarly will use or accept numbers as its input value now. Okay, let's take a look at the workbook that accompanies this series. If you haven't already downloaded it, you'll find a link down below. Open the book on tip 1 and let's have a look at the tables up here at the top. You can see this table has some basic facts about a group of students. So let's name it students. First select it by dragging from the top left down to the bottom right. Now let's type students in the name box up here. Once you've named the range, retyping students or selecting it from this drop down list here will automatically refocus Excel on our table. Now it might not be immediately apparent why this is a useful thing to be doing on your spreadsheets, but basically the benefits are that it's a whole lot easier to remember, and it means you can quickly refer to your range when writing formulas without the need to keep going back to look what the cell range was. It also makes your formula so much easier to read and understand. Let's take a look at a few more examples. Now I've defined it, I can write students in any Excel function that expects a range as its input value, and I'll get a result. So for example, equals columns students gives me the answer 5 because the table contains 5 columns. Similarly, equals row students gives me an answer of 7 for the 7 rows that make up the table. Equals index students, 4, 2 is going to read out the values stored in the 4th row in the 2nd column of our students table, so that returns the value buzz. If I edit this to 5, 3 instead, it's going to return the value in boots. So looking at these formulas, you can see that they make a lot more sense than the equivalent formulas that use the cell references. And as things in Excel tend to get very complicated very quickly, especially when we start introducing some of the more advanced techniques from later in this series, it's really going to make a difference. I'd like you to have a go now at task 1 down here in the workbook, so you have some experience of naming a range and recalling ranges. Just follow the instructions here and work directly in the page. You can pause the video and go do that now. Once you're done, come back and press play again. Okay, so I hope you managed to name the behavior table and use those names to refocus on particular areas on the spreadsheet. Now you can see from this drop down list that there are a whole bunch of other names that refer to different areas on different pages of this workbook. For a big spreadsheet, you might end up using a lot of these names. So Microsoft have included a tool for helping you manage all these names, which spookily they've called the Name Manager. You can find it in the Formula ribbon. Opening this, you'll see that it opens a dialog box which lets you create new names and also edit or delete existing ones. You can even use the Name Manager to create a named range in a totally different spreadsheet. Just click New, give it a name, and then select your range, which can be on the same page, on a different worksheet within the same workbook, or even in an entirely different workbook. So in this first lesson, we learned how to give a range on a spreadsheet a name, and how we can use that name in other formula to reduce their overall complexity and make them easier to read and understand. We've taken a look at the Name Manager, which helps keep track of all these names, and to add more, edit or delete names you made earlier. If you're happy you understood all about naming ranges, tick this box down here to mark that you've completed this section of the course. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the VLOOKUP function, which is a very powerful tool for merging two datasets together. By the time you've worked your way through the whole series, you'll have all the skills you need to make a dynamic gradebook of your own. So I'd really encourage you to see the whole series through. If you like this video, please do let me know by clicking on the like button below. Also, why not subscribe, which just means that YouTube is going to be a little bit more likely to recommend my videos to you in future. Click over here to start the next video in this Excel series, or click on the thumbnail below it for the full series playlist. You might also like this other great EdTech tutorial down here. See you on the next video.